Hey there, and welcome back to Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, the game! As you recall, in the last episode, we surveyed the sinister spinner Demolisher and rolled through his repertoire. And now, we are going to demonstrate the third and final key boss in Revenge of the Fallen, Devastator. Now, a fair word of warning. There is not going to be a lot I can actually present here. Much like Demolisher, Devastator doesn't even spawn in his appropriate map by default, so we have to do a little extra manipulation to even make him playable, and even then, there isn't much we can actually do with him. If he was actually playable on his proper map, this would play out a whole lot better. However, as it stands, this is the best I could give you. I'll still run through his basic mechanics and all that, but don't expect nearly as much coverage as we had for previous characters. But that's enough talk. Let's hit in game and take him in. Prepare for extermination! And here we have Devastator. As I said, his standard map does not work properly, so we're back in the Black Void like we were for Demolisher. So Devastator, like Demolisher, appears only in his titular chapter in Cairo City, Total Devastation, where you must destroy him by taking out his weapon systems as he circles the city of Cairo. Devastator is constructed from 5 main textures, a lot of which are hodgepodges of each vehicle, with a few minuscule parts that sometimes bleed over into other textures as well. First, there is his main body, which contains pieces of Scavenger, Mixmaster, and Scrapper, all of which encompass the torso and head. Next is a texture for his shoulders and upper arms, which contain trace pieces of Scavenger, but is mostly devoted to Scrapper. We also have a texture devoted solely to Hightower, as the left arm. Then, we move down to the legs with a unique texture primarily devoted to Longhaul, but it does have trace amounts of Rampage that is ever so slightly off color compared to his main texture. Which, finally, we have our left leg texture, which is mostly solely devoted to Rampage, but has some of Scrapper's finger parts included as well. Additionally though, he has a spare wiring and railing texture for some of his areas that make use of transparency. Well, that's all when it comes to textures, so let's move in close and get a detailed look at each individual part of this behemoth. Starting with the head, Devastator differs slightly from his final CGI counterpart, being more so based upon his early promotional renders. Hence, the missing red marks on his face. I'll try to stay clear of comparing this guy to his final CGI render too much, and just focus on the render that he is based on. Anyway, Devastator has bold green optics, which, fun fact, actually get their color from the in-game materials, as the texture itself is just completely white. Outside that, the decode seems to have been colored pretty well, with the only noteworthy issues seeming to be on Mixmaster's mixing drum, with the Decepticon insignia missing on the right side, and the darkened silver pattern being slightly off compared to its source material. Moving towards the upper body, there seems to be some interesting changes. This actually seems to be more of a hybrid of the concept version and the final CGI model, as there are some noteworthy distinctions around his upper torso section. The concept version has an upside-down RH400, whereas this version has a full-on white stripe, but the final CGI version has an ONK logo on this particular section. He, in general, seems to have way more white stripes compared to the concept render, which hardly has any at all. Turning around from the back, we get a good look at the exterior of his grinder vortex, which seems accurate enough. Reference for that particular part isn't the best for the concept model, but it's safe to say there's been some color changes between it and the final CGI render. Moving back around to the front, the shoulders seem similar enough. However, the concept render has the shoulders as being full-on yellow, whereas what we have here more so resembles the final CGI render again. Moving down to the arms, Hightower seems accurate enough. There may be a few slight deco changes, but overall nothing too noteworthy to mention. Moving to the opposite side, we have Scrapper, and the same seems to apply with what we saw with Hightower. Generally the same, but with some slight deco changes. Moving down to his legs, we have Rampage, which I don't have a great lot of reference for, but at least for the concept model, so I'd have to say it's probably accurate enough, at least as far as I could tell. Finally, we have Long Haul, which, again, reference isn't the best for, but it seems to be accurate enough. So yeah, all in all, this is way more of a hybrid between the concept version and the final CGI version, but generally leaning a bit more towards the final CGI version, at least deco-wise. As far as any actual bugs go, if he's got any, I sure as heck haven't come across them yet. Of course, this is a massive, complex build that I haven't had time to go through nearly as much as the others. So, while it is possible he does have some issues somewhere, I've yet to come across them. Anyway, that's all for the visual analysis. Let's move on to, well, what we can barely classify as gameplay. Starting with the health, Devastator has a maximum of 100,000 health points. Weirdly though, his health is completely independent from what you see in the health bar, and actually regenerates like normal player health. Whether this is some sort of bug from my particular swap in the dev build, or just something that's actually included in the base game, I can't say for certain. When it comes to movements, Devastator can move forward, and that's it. Yeah, he cannot jump, he cannot dodge, he cannot have any of his signature attacks manually triggered, nothing. He can only move forward, and one of his 2 signature attacks will trigger after he reaches a specific point on his route. And that is literally all I can show for gameplay. So, let's start running down specifics on his core attacks. First and foremost is his Grinder Vortex. This attack is instant death should you come within range of it, and should be avoided at all costs. He also fires a volley of Seeker missiles during this attack that do 90 damage in total if all were to hit you. Alternatively, there is the Ground Pound attack that shakes the ground and damages you if you're in contact with it. Each pound seems to deal 25 damage with a total damage value of 125. At least that's my best guess. It's difficult to get an exact number since there's no ground in the Black Void to actually stand on. When it comes to weapons, Devastator has no manual weapons that you can control, and instead has 3 unique sets that become active after a specific duration. And these don't even load properly on him in the dev build, so I can't even march around with them here. The first of these are his free rocket launchers that form out of his back. Each individual rocket does 15 damage per hit, and can fire uninterrupted until destroyed. Next, he has his 2 hip cannons that do 2 damage per shot, and each cannon can fire about 40 times before overheating. They also seem to have a pretty limited range, and become inactive when he uses his Grinder Vortex, which makes it the best point to hit them. Finally, he has his 2 arm guns, which also do 2 damage per shot, and can be fired about 36 times before quickly cooling down. These likewise become inactive during his Grinder Vortex attack. Since all he can do is walk, I'm not even going to bother trying to take this guy into action, so we're just gonna end it here in disappointment. And there you have Devastator! Yeah, I wish this one turned out better. If by some miracle, the dev build gets over to the PC version or something, or we can actually go to the proper maps, I will totally redo this one. Well, with Devastator done, we have covered all of the core bosses in the game. However, before we go on to the AI, which will not be this year, I can guarantee you that, I'm going to segue over to another sort of mini-series. We are now going to take a detailed look at the DLC characters. And generally, those should all play a lot better than the bosses we had here. So, stay tuned for that. Till then, Devastator sucks, and I ain't talking about the Vortex.